What's up, YouTube friends? Now today I'm going to show you how to make a giant disappearing 9-patch quilt top. It's really fast, super easy, and I'll show you how to whip it up next. So the things you're going to need to make this giant disappearing 9-patch quilt top are 9 fat quarters. Now I went ahead and I chose 4 of these colorful prints. For my middle block, I'm choosing this little white print that has all 4 of those colors in it. And then I went through my scrap box and I got 4 of these neutral gray prints. This quilt block is the perfect time to use some of those larger prints that you don't always get to use. These 4 corner squares are going to stay whole. These gray prints will be cut in half, and the middle print is going to be cut into 4ths. Now you could use any print that you want. Traditionally though, they usually do the middle one red, the corner pieces dark or light print, and then just the opposite for these pieces, they're either dark or light, whichever ones you didn't choose for the corner pieces. And that way you really get to see the pattern that comes out. But it's your quilt top, so do whatever you want. Now fat quarters usually run between 18 inches wide by 20 to 22 inches. So what you're going to want to do is go through all your fat quarters, find the smallest one, you want to square that up, and then cut the rest of your fat quarters to that same size. I've already went ahead and done that, so now all I'm going to do is press these flat. I'm going to take them over to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew these into rows. So I'm going to sew this gray one to the yellow one, and I'm going to press my seam to the right. Then I'm going to take this green one, sew it to the gray one, and press it to the right. On the next row, I'm going to do the same thing, except for I'm going to press my seams to the left. And on the final third row, the same thing, and I'm going to press it to the right. And that way, when we go to sew our rows together, our seams will nestle up nicely. Alright guys, so one more thing before I go to the sewing machine. Now my fat quarters, I cut them down to 18 to 21 inches. So when we sew these together, my 18 is along the top and my 21 is along the side. So then I'm going to fold over my gray piece with the right sides touching. And then with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I'm going to backstitch at the beginning, sew all the way down, and backstitch at the end. Now I'm just going to take my hot iron and I'm going to press my seam to the right. Then I'm going to take my next fat quarter, I'm going to lay it over my gray piece with the right sides facing. I'm going to take it over to my sewing machine and do the same thing right here on this side, backstitching at the beginning and the end. So I'm just going to finish up the rest of my rows and I'll bring you back when I'm ready to join them together. So once you have your rows all sewed together, this is my first row and I have my second row right underneath. So then I'm just going to flip this so that the right sides are touching. And I'm going to line up my seams. Because we did our pressing in opposite directions, they should nestle just nicely and lock together. And then stick a pin. So now I'm just going to come down to the other seam, nestle them together, and stick a pin. Now you don't need to worry if the edges don't line up. You can see right here, I have a little bit extra. That's just fine. We can always trim that off later. You just really want to make sure that your seams line up nicely. So I'm just going to take this back over to my sewing machine with that same 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to backstitch at the end and sew all the way down. When I'm done with that, I'll press it and then I'll attach the third row. So I have all 3 of my rows all sewed together now. And now I'm just going to trim up the sides if you have any that's hanging over. So I have my large ruler here. I'm going to line up one of my lines with my seam. And then make sure it's straight along one of your sides. This part has a little bit of extra, so I'm going to line it up straight with this gray piece. And you can also check down here to make sure that it's even over here, and then just cut it off. Next, we're going to take our quilt top and I'm going to fold it in half the long way. So I'm going to make sure my seam right here, as you can see, it's folded in half. I'm going to make sure that those line up, and I'm going to stick a pin. Then I'm going to go down to the bottom side and do the same thing. So I have a pin right here and a pin on the other side. So now I'm just going to fold it in half the other way. Give it a shake. And then I'm just going to make sure that where my two pins are, that's matching up nicely also, which mine is. So I'm just going to remove the pin and repin all the layers just with one pin. Just like that. Now I'm just going to take this over to my ironing board and I'm going to give it a press. So right here I have 2 folds, and then up here is 1 fold, and I'm just going to press right here and right here. Alright, so I ironed the creases in my folds. So now with my fabric scissors, I'm going to stick it in between my fabrics. So on this larger fold, you should have 2 fabrics on the top and 2 fabrics at the bottom of your scissors, and then cut right along that fold. If you get off your line just a little bit, that's fine. You can hide that in the seam allowance, but you do want to get as close as possible to that line. And now I'm just going to come back and cut the 2 folds. Alright guys, for the next step, I think it'll be easier to show you here on the paper, so I kind of mocked up a little demonstration here. So the red block is our center piece. The black ones, in my case, were the colorful pieces, and the white ones are the gray pieces. And I went ahead and I cut them in half, and then in half again. Now there are many different patterns for the disappearing 9 patch. Had these been squares, we'd have a lot more, but because we're doing rectangles, we only have a few options, but they still look beautiful. So for the first one, and this is the one I'm going to do for this quilt top in particular, I'm going to take one of the corner pieces and I'm going to spin it. I'm going to the opposite corner and I'm going to do the same thing. And as you can see, just by using 3 colors, it still turns out beautiful. Now for the next one, I'm going to turn this corner one this way. I'm going to turn this one this way. I'm going to come down here to this block. I'm going to turn it that way. And the same thing with the other block. Just like that. And this way you get kind of a little pinwheel in the middle. I think that looks great also. Alright guys, so for the last option that I'm going to show you, you want to put all of your center blocks towards the corners. So I'm just going to spin them. Just like that. Now the only thing that I don't necessarily like about this pattern, just because I want it to be fast and easy, is you're going to have to come through in each one of these seams and make sure that they match up nicely. However, I think this would be a great idea for one of those picture quilts like you give your grandmother or your mother. Nowadays we can print on fabric, so each one of these squares could be a picture of a grandchild and then frame it out. I think it looks great. But like I said, I'm just going to keep it simple, and I'm going to stick with this pattern right here. Alright guys, forgive me, I'm still in my jammies. But I'm going to take this first block and I'm going to spin it around. Then I'm going to go to the opposite corner and spin it around. Just like that. So now I'm just going to go back over to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew together those two top pieces, and I'm going to press my seam to the right. Then I'm just going to sew the two bottom pieces and I'm going to press my seam to the left. When I'm done with that, I'm just going to sew the two pieces together, making sure that my center point and my seams nestle up nicely, and stick a pin. I'll be using that same 1/4 inch seam allowance, and my length is still a 2.5. And don't forget to backstitch at the beginning and the end. Alright guys, and here's what it looks like all finished, and I think it turned out great. Now I got this idea off a lady here on YouTube, and her name is Darlene Machad. I don't think I'm saying her name right, but that's also the name of her YouTube channel, so go over and check her out. I will warn you though, she does curse and she is no nonsense, which I find hilarious. Now this quilt top measures about 52 inches wide and 61 inches long, give or take. And I think that's a perfect little lap size quilt, or a perfect size for a kid. And here are a few more examples that I've done. Now in this one I used prints that were very nature themed. There's bears, moose, foxes, raccoons, some feathers, owls, and even some sharks. And I think this would look great in a cabin or a lake house. And in this one I used Star Wars fabric. Now this one's not actually my favorite, but hey, maybe you guys like it. The only thing I really don't like is this middle fabric. I got a fat quarter bundle at Walmart with the Star Wars fabric, and I needed one more fabric for the center, so I chose that black and gold. In the beginning I thought it kind of looked like a lightsaber or maybe a comet trail, but once I sewed it together, not really my favorite. And no one says you have to cut up your quilt top. With this one, when I got it all sewed together, I liked how it looked just as is. I think it's very modern and will look great in a little girl's room or in a dorm room, something like that. On this one has a bee theme on the corner fabrics as well as in the middle, and on the sides I just had some leftover gold, black and white geometric prints, and I think it turned out great. Now this is one of the ones I made for the house here. It's with Harry Potter fabric, and of course I'm a Slytherin, and I used that second design that looks like a pinwheel. I think this one turned out great. Now since I'm a big boy, I need a big blanket, so what I did was put a 2.5 inch sashing around the sides and then a 6 inch border. Now to finish off this quilt, I just used a sheet for the back that I got at the Goodwill, and then I just attached this all together with my easy quilt finishing technique. I'll link my video in the iCard right here. And then just to finish it off, I tied it together. Now this one would have to be my favorite one. I just love this blueprint right here. For this I used some superhero prints that I got at Walmart, and this is a mashup of DC and Marvel. That might be pretty blasphemous. Well, I hope you liked this video and you give it a try. If you like this video and want to see more of my videos, go down below and hit that big red subscribe button and give this video a big thumbs up. If you have any questions about this video or any of my other videos, or just like to leave a suggestion for a future upcoming video, leave me a comment. Subscribe to me over on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month will keep these videos coming, and you'll also get these videos one day earlier than YouTube. Friend me over on Facebook at Scrappy's Patch if you'd like to share crafting ideas and pictures. I always love to see what you guys are making. Minus this quilt top and the Harry Potter quilt top. The rest of these are going to be on my Etsy shop. I'd like to have it open no later than the 4th of July. So I'd really love it if you'd go over there and heart my shop. That way you'll get notified as to when I do open my shop on your Etsy page. Check out all my other links down below. And as always, thanks for watching. Happy sewing, and I'll see you next time.